There I was, standing at the edge of my family's lakefront property, watching bulldozers tear into the shoreline like hungry metal beasts. Workers in bright Lakeview luxury resort vests swarmed everywhere, transforming my peaceful lakefront into a construction zone. And there she was, Karen Williams, our HOA president, sitting in her shiny BMW, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, the construction is proceeding exactly as planned," she purred into the phone. "That stubborn holdout won't know what hit him." That stubborn holdout was me. What Karen didn't know was that in 3 months, I'd be signing papers worth $1,200,000,000, 0 cents. More money than her entire HOA would see in 10 lifetimes. What would you do if someone started building on your property? Drop a comment below and stick around to see how I turned their power trip into the sweetest revenge possible. My name's James Anderson. I'm a 42-year-old civil engineer, and until this whole mess started, I lived a pretty quiet life in my grandfather's lakefront cabin with my teenage daughter Mia. This place has been in our family for 3 generations. 5 acres with 400 feet of prime lakefront that my grandfather built himself back in the 50s. And I can still remember fishing with him off our dock when I was Mia's age. "Remember, Jimmy," he'd say, squinting against the morning sun, "they don't make land anymore. Hold on to what you've got." After my wife passed away 5 years ago, this place became even more special. It was our sanctuary, mine and Mia's. I work from home designing water management systems, and Mia, well, she's 16 now and practically lives in the lake during summer. Unlike the manicured lawns around us, we've kept our shoreline natural. Cattails, native grasses, the way nature intended. The earthy smell of lake mud mixed with pine is like therapy when I walk the property line at dawn. Over the past 15 years, lakeshore estates grew up around us. A wealthy development with fancy homes that cost more than I'll make in my lifetime. 3 years ago, they formed an HOA. I declined to join despite the pressure. My property was grandfathered in. No obligation to join their little club. Enter Karen Williams, HOA president, former real estate developer, and the kind of person who uses summer as a verb. She drives luxury cars, flaunts designer clothes, and seems to think the lake exists solely for her property values. It started with residents-only signs on the community boat ramp, which legally should have access for all waterfront owners, including me. Then came a notice of regulatory violation for my unsightly natural shoreline, with a $500 0 cents fine attached. I called the county zoning office, who confirmed what I already knew. My property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. I sent a registered letter stating this fact and received a mocking response. "Rules are rules, Mr. Anderson. This lake community has standards." I heard the crunch of gravel one afternoon as Karen's Mercedes pulled up my driveway, uninvited. She stepped out, designer sunglasses perched on her head, looking at my cabin like it was a dead possum. "Your little cabinet is driving down property values," she said, without even a hello. "Either clean it up or sell it to someone who will." "My grandfather built this place," I replied calmly. "It's not for sale at any price." Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone has a price, and those who don't, well, accidents happen." The next morning, I noticed survey stakes had appeared along my property line overnight. I was drinking my morning coffee when I heard chainsaws. Nothing gets a man moving faster than the sound of chainsaws on property he's paying taxes on. I sprinted down to the shoreline to find a construction crew clearing trees along what I was damn sure was my land. Their yellow equipment was everywhere, and the foreman, a beefy guy with a clipboard, looked annoyed when I approached. "You're on private property," I told him. "Actually, we're not." He thrust a survey document at me. "This 20 feet of shoreline is HOA common area, always has been." I called the sheriff, who came out, looked bored, and told me it was a civil matter, but suggested I get my own survey. So I did. Paid rush fees to have it done that week. The surveyor confirmed what I already knew. They were encroaching on my boundary by nearly 15 feet. The acrid diesel exhaust from their excavators hung in the air for days, killing the natural lake smell I'd grown up with. I filed an injunction with the local court to stop construction. The HOA responded with a lawsuit claiming historic use rights to my shoreline. Their lawyer, slick as an oil spill, argued they had been using that part of the shoreline for years, which apparently gave them some kind of claim. That's when I learned about adverse possession laws. Basically, if someone uses your property openly for a certain period without you challenging them, they can actually claim legal ownership of it. In our state, it's 15 years of unchallenged use. The HOA was claiming residents had been using that section of shoreline since before I took over the property from my parents. Here's the takeaway. Document every trespass and respond in writing, or your silence could legally transfer your property rights. While the legal battle was brewing, the HOA announced plans for a massive community dock to be built directly in front of my property, the one section of shoreline that hadn't been developed. I started researching property records, water rights, and state regulations, trying to find anything that would help my case. Meanwhile, Karen's first major escalation came when the HOA installed bright security lights aimed directly at my house, claiming safety concerns for lake users. So I counterpunched. I installed privacy hedges just tall enough to block their light without violating any height regulations. Karen was furious. I could see it in the tight smile she gave me at the post office the next day. Her response? Having HOA security issue citations to my friends whenever they visited, claiming they were parking in unauthorized areas despite being in my own driveway. I counterpunched again. I got the county to install public right-of-ways signs on the access road, confirming that the HOA had no jurisdiction over who drove to my property. That evening, while searching through some old boxes in my boathouse, I found something interesting. A weathered "No Wake Zone" sign with county certification stickers from the 1970s. Something about it made me pause. The county logo looked different than the current one. Maybe there was more to the history of this lake than I remembered. The HOA began weekend construction starting at 7 a.m. sharp on Saturdays and Sundays, directly violating the county noise ordinances that prohibited construction before 9 a.m. on weekends. I documented everything with videos and sound readings, filing complaints with local officials that seemed to disappear into a black hole. Around here, the Planning Commission and Country Club share more than just a parking lot. They share members, and those members all seem to live in Lakeshore Estates. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting despite not being a member. I figured I could at least voice my concerns during the public comment period, but I was rudely turned away at the door by a security guard who said, "Members only, buddy." While researching who exactly was on the HOA board, I discovered something interesting. Karen's husband, Richard Williams, sat on the county zoning board, the same board that had been ignoring my complaints. Talk about a conflict of interest. Karen's next move was hiring private security to patrol HOA lakefront, which now included patrols along my shoreline. These rent-a-cops in khaki uniforms started harassing Mia and her friends while they were swimming off our dock, claiming they were too loud and disturbing residents. That's when I started researching riparian water rights, the specific legal rights that come with owning property adjacent to water bodies. I learned that ownership of land adjacent to water includes certain rights to the water itself, not just the land. The key takeaway: your shoreline property doesn't just give you a view, it gives you legal rights to access and reasonable use of the water itself. Armed with this knowledge, I installed property line cameras and captured footage of their security guards trespassing on my land. I sent cease and desist letters with the footage attached. The security backed off, at least from physically crossing onto my property, but they started using bullhorns from boats just offshore, claiming they were patrolling HOA waters. Karen's next escalation came when full resort construction began, including dredging operations that were clearly affecting my shoreline. The constant beep, beep, beep of construction equipment backing up made it impossible to sleep past 7 a.m., and the dredging stirred up the lake bed so badly that dead fish started washing up on my shoreline. I reported the environmental violations to the state EPA, who sent out an inspector. Mysteriously, he found no violations, despite the obvious evidence of environmental damage. As he was leaving, he muttered something about having kids in college and needing his pension. But I had my counterpunch ready. I'd been using my drone to capture footage of their dredging operation, releasing sediment directly into a protected fish spawning area. I leaked the footage to a local environmental group that had fought development projects before. They created a social media campaign that caught fire, with people from around the state sharing images of the destruction. The pressure forced a temporary construction halt while officials investigated. I used the breathing room to start digging through county archives, looking for anything that might help my case. I had a hunch there was more to the story of this lake than met the eye. My research at the county archives revealed something surprising. This lake wasn't natural. It had been created by my grandfather's dam construction in the 1950s. He had built a small earthen dam at the narrow end of what was previously a seasonal marsh, creating the permanent lake that now hosted million-dollar homes. The day after this discovery, a certified letter arrived from the HOA with an official buyout offer for my property. $850,000, 0 cents. It was a lot of money, but well below the market value for lakefront property in the area. Especially 5 acres with 400 feet of shoreline. That afternoon, Karen showed up with a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, a real estate developer named Harrison from some big firm in the city. They threatened that if I wouldn't sell voluntarily, they'd pursue eminent domain through their connections on the county commission. As they walked the property, Karen tripped on one of the natural shoreline rocks and nearly fell into the mud. Nature has a way of rejecting those who reject it. The pressure took a new turn when Mia came home from school, upset. Kids from Lakeshore Estates, including Karen's son, had been bullying her, saying we were lake trash and that we'd be gone soon anyway. The whole school was buzzing with rumors that our property was being taken for the resort project. That night, I seriously considered selling just to protect my daughter from more pain. When I mentioned this possibility, Mia surprised me. "Dad, this is our home," she said fiercely. "Grandpa built it. Mom loved it. Don't let them take it." "Sometimes fighting isn't worth what it costs you," I replied softly. Mia's eyes flashed. She looked so much like her mother then. "Mom would have fought. She always said you need to stand up to bullies or they never stop." She was right, of course. I spent the next few days researching property deed restrictions and water rights in county records. I discovered that many properties have restrictions, easements, or rights attached to them that most current owners know nothing about. Because most people never read the full chain of title or original deeds. The takeaway? The answers to today's property disputes are often buried in century-old documents nobody bothers to read. Construction resumed with an expanded scope, now including a marina that would block my lake access completely. I consulted with an environmental attorney who specialized in water rights, but his retainer was steep, nearly wiping out my emergency savings. Karen's next move was truly low. An anonymous call to child services claiming my home was unsafe and that Mia was being neglected. The investigator who showed up was apologetic after seeing our immaculate home and speaking with Mia. As she was leaving, she hinted that the complaint was obviously malicious and advised me to watch my back. My counterpunch? I had my lawyer send a letter to the HOA board, copying all members, detailing the harassment and explaining that any further false reports would result in legal action for defamation and malicious prosecution. Meanwhile, the HOA began advertising Lakeview Luxury Resort with glossy brochures showing renderings of development across sections of what was clearly my property. They were selling a fantasy. They couldn't deliver. Late one night, after hours at the county records office scanning historical survey maps, I found something that made my heart race. I worked until the clerk kicked me out at closing time, then continued my research at home, falling asleep at my computer around 3 a.m. What I found changed everything. The documents revealed that my grandfather's original dam construction had created 70% of the current lake. What had been a small natural pond and seasonal marsh became Lake Anderson, later renamed Lakeshore Lake by the developers thanks to his engineering work. More importantly, I found water rights documents from 1952 granting my family perpetual water management rights to the entire lake. These rights had never been transferred or surrendered. They'd just been forgotten, as the property passed down through our family. I learned something crucial about water rights versus property rights. While people around the lake owned their land parcels, the actual water rights operated under different legal principles. The key takeaway: you can own land without controlling the water, but whoever controls the water ultimately controls the land. I also discovered that my grandfather's water management company, Anderson Water Works, technically still existed on paper, with ownership having passed to me as the sole heir after my father's death. The company had been dormant for decades, but legally, it had never been dissolved. The engineering diagrams I found showed water control structures still operational beneath my boathouse. Structures that could control the lake's water level within a 5-foot range. I called my grandfather's old friend, Tim Rogers, who was in his 90s now but still sharp as a tack. "Your granddad was smart," old Tim told me, sipping coffee at my kitchen table. "He knew developers would come someday. That's why he never sold the water rights, only the land parcels." "So legally, what does this mean?" I asked. Tim's weathered face broke into a mischievous smile. "It means they might own the dirt, but you own the lake. Without your permission, that fancy resort is just a building in a mud pit." I spread out the old blueprints on the table, feeling the musty smell of old paper and the smooth feel of faded engineer's vellum under my fingers. The detailed plans showed how the entire lake system worked: the dam, the overflow structures, the spring-fed water sources. My research also uncovered a maintenance easement allowing legal access to all shoreline properties for the purpose of water management and dam maintenance, which meant I had legal right to access any part of the shoreline. What's more, mapping showed that underground springs on my property fed the lake with fresh water. Without these springs, the lake would eventually stagnate. I realized the legal leverage I had, but I needed proof of the ownership chain to make it legally binding. I drove to the storage unit where we'd kept my mother's belongings after she passed and spent hours going through dusty boxes. In the back of a file cabinet, I found what I needed: original company papers, water rights certificates, and documentation showing the legal succession of ownership. I nearly fell into a massive spiderweb while reaching for the last box. I was about to become a water baron, but first I had to defeat Charlotte and her web. I showed the documents to my attorney, who was stunned by their significance. "The HOA's development plans require water access they legally don't control," he explained, shaking his head in disbelief. "You don't just have a defense, James," he said finally. "You have a nuclear option." I spent the next week assembling a team: my environmental attorney, a water rights specialist from the city, my civil engineer colleague Dave, and Sarah, a local journalist who'd been skeptical of the development from the beginning. We learned about water rights valuation in real estate development, a specialized field most people never think about. In drought-prone regions especially, water rights can be incredibly valuable. The key takeaway: water rights in drought-prone regions can be worth more than the land itself, sometimes 10 times more. We gathered for a strategy session in my cabin, with maps and documents spread across every available surface. I explained my grandfather's water control system, showing how it could legally adjust lake levels within a 5-foot range, all within historical norms. Dave examined the engineering diagrams and confirmed the system was likely still functional, but would need repairs after decades of disuse. While digging through maintenance records, I found my grandfather's handwritten maintenance log. My grandfather's handwriting looked like he was writing during an earthquake, but his engineering was precise to the millimeter. Our team divided responsibilities based on expertise. I would work on restoring the water control mechanism hidden beneath the old boathouse. My attorney would prepare legal documentation and incorporation papers to revive the water utility company. Sarah would research connections between HOA board members and county officials, looking for reportable conflicts of interest. Dave would document the environmental impact of the resort construction, building a case for regulatory intervention. We discussed creating a legal structure for the water rights. My attorney explained the process of converting historical water rights into a modern utility company. The takeaway: converting historical water rights into a modern utility company creates both legal protection and potential profit. Over the next few weeks, I quietly spent my evenings in the boathouse, cleaning and restoring the old water control mechanism. It was fascinating work. My grandfather had built a system that could subtly adjust outflow from the dam, effectively controlling the lake level with precision. Meanwhile, I filed paperwork establishing Anderson Lake Management Authority as a legitimate company, officially claiming the water rights that had been in my family for generations. I'd filed formal water rights claims with the State Water Board and registered as an official utility company with the Regulatory Commission. The paperwork was extensive, but my attorney guided me through every step. Mia and I spent weekends cataloging environmental features of the lake for our protection filing, identifying nesting areas, cataloging fish species, and documenting the ecosystem that had developed around our natural shoreline. When I finally finished restoring the control mechanism, I tested it with minimal adjustment. The ancient valve squeaked loudly as I turned it for the first time in decades, followed by the satisfying gurgle of water flowing through the long-dormant system. The test caused an almost imperceptible change in water level, just 2 inches, but it was enough to make the resort construction area noticeably muddier the next day. Karen noticed immediately. A threatening letter arrived the following morning about interference with development activities and promising legal consequences. As part of our strategy, we began documenting conflicts of interest among local officials involved in approving the resort development. The takeaway? A documented conflict of interest can invalidate years of official decisions and permits. We prepared comprehensive documentation of all violations and conflicts, building a case that would be irrefutable when the time came to reveal it. As I marked the date of the next county commission meeting on my calendar, I felt calm for the first time in months. We had a plan, we had documentation, and most importantly, we had the legal high ground. Resort construction accelerated to a frantic pace. Crews worked around the clock, powerful floodlights illuminating the site at night. Karen announced a grand opening date just 6 weeks away, promising celebrity appearances and a fireworks display over the lake. A manila envelope appeared on my porch one morning. No return address, no postmark. Inside were photos of me meeting with my attorney, walking into the county records office, and talking with Sarah. The implied threat was clear. We're watching you. Nothing says welcome to the neighborhood like a process server hiding in your bushes at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The HOA filed a lawsuit claiming I was interfering with community progress and development through unspecified actions detrimental to property values. The judge assigned to the case had played golf with Karen's husband regularly, a fact Sarah discovered through social media photos. He fast-tracked the case to be heard the week before the resort's grand opening. My attorney filed an emergency motion revealing the water rights ownership, forcing the court to acknowledge the situation was more complex than a simple nuisance complaint. The court ordered mediation, but construction continued unabated. They were racing against the clock, hoping to create a fait accompli before legal proceedings could stop them. Karen's desperation showed when she attempted to bribe my attorney, offering him a consulting position with the development company worth 3 times his current annual income, if he would reconsider his approach to my case. My attorney recorded the conversation but advised against using it immediately. In property disputes, he explained, sometimes your strongest move is letting your opponent fully commit to their mistake before revealing your hand. The resort began pre-sale exclusive memberships, taking $50,000 0-cents deposits for founding member status. Their marketing materials showcased water features, a marina, and lake activities that all required access to water they didn't legally control. I formally notified the county of my water rights claim and utility company formation, forcing them to acknowledge receipt of the documents. County officials, seeing the threat to their precious development, attempted to fast-track approval of all remaining resort permits before my claim could be fully processed. Sarah published the first in a series of articles on the cozy relationships between developers and county officials, detailing campaign contributions, family connections, and questionable land deals that preceded the resort development. Karen escalated again. This time, a suspicious fire broke out in my boathouse. The fire department arrived quickly, and the damage was minimal, but the fire inspector found evidence of accelerant. Despite this, the case was mysteriously closed within 48 hours as cause undetermined. What Karen didn't know was that I had already moved the control mechanism and all critical documents to a secure location. I also installed a high-end security system donated by a tech entrepreneur who had faced similar HOA troubles in another state, complete with motion-activated cameras and direct connection to the sheriff's department. As the resort construction reached its final phases, the investment was clearly massive. Custom furniture being delivered, landscapers placing mature trees, champagne glasses being unloaded for the grand opening, clinking together like coins being counted. A messenger delivered a final buyout offer to my door, $2 million, 0 cents, with a 24-hour deadline for response. The letter emphasized the inevitability of the resort opening and suggested this was my last opportunity to benefit from progress. I responded with a simple letter. The Anderson family is not interested in selling at this time. Grand opening week arrived with construction crews working around the clock to finish the resort. The sound of nail guns and power tools continued well past permitted hours, but no officials responded to complaints. The guest list for the opening gala was impressive. Major investors, regional politicians, even a minor celebrity or two. A national business publication ran a glossy feature on Lakeview Luxury Resort as a model for integrated luxury development and the future of lake living. Karen gave interviews to local media, taking personal credit for the neighborhood transformation and increased property values. She described how she had personally overseen every detail of the resort development. I'd filed an emergency petition with the State Water Authority regarding unauthorized usage of regulated waters, complete with documentation of the lake's history and my family's legal rights. The authority scheduled a hearing, but for the week after the grand opening date. We dove deeper into water rights regulations, discovering that interstate water regulations could provide additional leverage. The takeaway: when local authorities fail, escalating to state and federal water authorities can bypass corrupt local officials. As opening day approached, Karen made one final desperate move to undermine me. She began spreading rumors about my business and personal life, suggesting I was in financial trouble, that my engineering business was failing, that Mia was having problems. Local businesses began canceling my engineering contracts with vague excuses. Meanwhile, I discovered Karen's husband had accessed Mia's school records illegally, looking for ammunition to use against us. When my friend Mark called to warn me about the rumors, he said, "In a small town, gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi and is about as reliable as dial-up." I countered by having my attorney send cease and desist letters regarding defamation to everyone involved in spreading the rumors. I also quietly met with an FBI agent regarding the computer fraud involved in accessing Mia's protected school records. 3 days before opening, the resort began filling its swimming pools and water features. Massive amounts of water being pumped directly from the lake without permits. We obtained satellite imagery showing the volume of water being withdrawn. I learned about regulatory thresholds for water usage and how they triggered different levels of oversight. The takeaway: most developers don't realize that water withdrawal over 10,000 gallons triggers federal permits, regardless of local approval. The day before the water features were completed, I exercised my legal right as a utility owner to inspect the water usage meters at the resort property. With a sheriff's deputy present, one who didn't golf with Karen's husband, I documented the illegal pumps drawing lake water without permits or water rights. I documented everything meticulously but remained silent about what I'd found. The deputy, seeing the evidence, muttered, "Been wondering when someone would notice that." The day before the grand opening was a flurry of activity. Delivery trucks, caterers setting up, media arriving to get B-roll footage of the resort. Karen strutted around in a white pantsuit, directing staff and gloating to anyone who would listen about how the resort would put our community on the map. That evening I sat quietly with Mia on our dock, watching the sunset reflect off the lake. "Do you think this will work, Dad?" she asked. "It has to," I replied. "This lake is as much a part of our family as this house. Tomorrow we take back our lake." After Mia went to bed, I made a series of phone calls to set our plan in motion. "Everything's ready," I confirmed to my attorney. "It's time." Grand opening day dawned clear and perfect. A line of luxury cars stretched down the access road as guests arrived for the 11 a.m. ribbon-cutting ceremony. State politicians, investors in tailored suits, and media with camera crews gathered on the resort's massive lakefront patio. I arrived in my grandfather's restored vintage truck, dressed in a simple but sharp blazer and jeans. Security tried to block my entrance, but my timing was perfect. My attorney arrived simultaneously with the sheriff and a federal water resource inspector in tow. The artificial floral scent pumped through the resort's ventilation system couldn't quite mask the smell of fresh paint and construction adhesive as we made our way through the crowd. Karen took the podium to begin her speech about the visionary project that would transform the region. She used the word exclusive 7 times in 1 minute, a new personal record. Just as waitstaff began circulating with champagne flutes for the toast, the federal officials moved forward and served multiple documents to the resort manager, development company representative, and Karen herself. A water rights violation notice, a cease and desist order on water usage, notice of an environmental impact investigation. Karen attempted to dismiss it as a minor paperwork issue that wouldn't interfere with our wonderful celebration. But the damage was done. Murmurs spread through the crowd as investors pulled out phones and began making calls. That's when I stepped forward, nodding to Sarah, who had her camera rolling. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet patio, "there seems to be some confusion about who owns the water in this lake." I unfolded a presentation board showing 3 key documents. The original water rights documentation from 1952, the utility company formation papers for Anderson Lake Management Authority, a map clearly showing legal ownership of 70% of the lake water. "My grandfather built this lake in 1952, I explained calmly, and while he sold parcels of land around it, the Anderson family never sold the water rights. In fact, those rights have been held continuously by Anderson Water Works, now reorganized as Anderson Lake Management Authority, a fully registered and approved water utility company." I explained riparian rights and water management regulations in simple terms, watching comprehension dawn on the faces of the investors. A registered water utility has more legal authority over water usage than any private developer or even municipal government. That's not my opinion, that's federal law. I revealed that the federal government had approved Anderson Lake Management Authority as the official regional water utility for the lake and explained that the resort had been illegally tapping lake water. "The federal fine for unauthorized water usage is $50,000, 0 cents per day," I noted. "By my calculation, you're already liable for over $2 million, 0 cents, in fines, with personal liability for the directors who authorized the illegal withdrawal." Karen tried to interrupt, claiming I was making things up and trying to extort the community, but I simply played the recording of her attempted bribe of my attorney on a portable speaker. The investors looked horrified, several immediately pulling resort executives aside for heated conversations. One prominent state official quickly made for the exit, not wanting to be associated with the unfolding disaster. A developer publicly confronted Karen. "You guaranteed us the water rights were secured. It was in the prospectus." The situation escalated further when FBI agents arrived, asking to speak with Richard Williams regarding the computer fraud investigation. Camera crews that had come to film a celebration were now capturing a meltdown. I remained calm throughout, explaining that my grandfather's foresight had created both the lake and the legal framework that protected it. "He understood that water is our most valuable resource," I said, "more valuable than any resort or real estate development." Then came my final move. I laid out the choice clearly for all to hear. The resort has 2 options. 1. Purchase water rights from Anderson Lake Management Authority at fair market value with binding conservation easements to protect the ecosystem. I paused, letting the first option sink in before continuing. Or 2. Beginning tomorrow, I will legally adjust the lake level by lowering the outflow dam by 3 feet, well within my legal rights as utility manager. I displayed a visual aid showing how a 3-foot reduction would leave the resort's docks, beaches, and water features completely dry, essentially rendering the lakefront resort waterless. The crowd erupted in chaos. Karen's face went from red to white as the implications became clear. The head investor, a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit, approached me directly. "I think we should talk numbers," he said quietly. 1 month later, I sat in a downtown office building, signing the final contract. The deal was structured better than I could have imagined. $1,200,000,000, 0 cents for controlled water rights and development rights, while I retained ownership of my family property with permanent legal protections. Converting a natural resource into a managed asset can create sustainable wealth while ensuring environmental protection. Karen had resigned from the HOA under pressure from residents furious about the scandal. Her husband was under investigation for corruption and computer fraud, facing potential jail time for accessing protected school records. The new resort management implemented the environmental protection plan I had developed, redesigning parts of the resort to preserve natural shoreline areas and protect fish spawning grounds. I heard nobody showed up for Karen's going-away party except the process server with more legal papers. I established the Anderson Lake Conservation Trust with 60% of the proceeds, creating a permanent endowment to protect the lake ecosystem, provide public education about water conservation, and maintain water quality for generations to come. The trust funded new science education programs, focused on water conservation, and created scholarships for environmental engineering students. The sound of children laughing during the first field trip to the new Lakeside Education Center was better than any revenge could be. I kept a modest amount for my family's security and slowly remodeled our cabin while preserving its character. Mia and I still fish from our dock, now protected forever by ironclad legal agreements. The resort itself was redesigned to better coexist with natural shoreline areas. The new management team, chastened by the public relations disaster, embraced environmental sustainability as their marketing angle. Sometimes adversaries become your best advocates when properly motivated. Community healing began with the first annual Lake Heritage Festival, bringing together original residents and new homeowners around a shared appreciation for the lake's beauty and history. The resort hired me as their chief environmental consultant, an irony not lost on anyone. And together we implemented sustainable practices that became a model for other developments nationwide. Last week I taught a water conservation class to local children at the lake edge. One attentive boy reminded me of myself at that age, asking detailed questions about how the dam worked and why wetlands matter. My grandfather once told me they don't make land anymore, I told the children. What he really meant was that we have a responsibility to protect what we have. This lake isn't just water. It's our past and our future. The Anderson Lake Conservation Trust is now working to purchase and protect the remaining undeveloped lakeshore, creating a wilderness area that will remain pristine forever. Meanwhile, there's a for sale sign on Karen's lakefront mansion. Last I heard, they've had no takers. Turns out people research water rights more carefully these days before buying lakefront property. Mia graduated high school last week. She's heading to college in the fall to study environmental law. Someone's got to protect the next lake, she told me with a smile. So that's how I turned an HOA's power trip into billions, and more importantly, saved a piece of natural heritage for generations to come. The money's nice, but the real wealth is in what we preserved. Drop a comment with your HOA nightmare stories, and subscribe for more incredible stories of everyday people outsmarting corrupt systems.